Why is it harder to lose weight in your 40s and 50s? So, if you're a woman in your 40s or 50s and you just can't lose weight, or maybe you're gaining weight even though you're doing all the things you know to do, we're going to talk about what's going on in your body to cause that and what you can do to start losing weight and reverse what's going on in your body.
Welcome to She's Healthy, a podcast for ambitious women on their journey to become the healthiest version of themselves. I'm your host, Lori Aikman.
Welcome to the She's Healthy podcast. If this is your first time here, my name is Lori Aikman. I am a nurse practitioner in Florida. I have a telemedicine practice called Queen Bee Medicine. And then I also have a health coaching practice called Crown Executive Health. In both those practices, I serve women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who are really just looking to improve their health. I do have to give you my medical disclaimer before we jump into this episode. So I am a nurse practitioner, but this podcast is for informational purposes only. This does not constitute medical advice. And I do recommend that you consult with your doctor, your physician, your provider before you make any changes to your health based on what we're sharing today. All right, without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, if this is you, you're like, yes, this is my episode. I need to listen to this. So if you're in your 40s, your 50s, you've hit this point in your life where like all of a sudden you're gaining weight or you can't lose weight. You're like, I'm still going to the gym. I'm still doing the diets. I used to be able to do this and I would lose weight. And now the weight is not coming off. I hear you. I talk to so many women who are in this same boat. They're really frustrated because they're working really hard. They're doing all the things they know to do, and it just seems like things are not working. For what we're going to talk about today is why it's harder to lose weight. What exactly is driving that weight gain or maybe that weight loss resistance if you're like, I'm maintaining my weight, but I can't lose. I still have this extra weight that I can't get rid of. So first I want to talk about, and what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to try and keep this episode. I try and keep these episodes nice and, 20, maybe max 30 minutes for you guys. Cause I know for me, if I listen to something really long, I don't get through it all. So quickly diving in, we're going to talk about what is going on in your body. So first I have to start with perimenopause. Okay. Some of you hold on if you already are in menopause, just for the ladies that are not in menopause yet, we do have to address this. So perimenopause, what the heck does that mean? So the average age of menopause, which is when your ovaries stop producing eggs and then your estrogen and progesterone levels drop drastically, right? Progesterone actually goes away. Estrogen goes really, really, really low. So the average age of that for women in the US is 51. I actually don't know what it is worldwide. That's something I should look up sometime. But as much as 10 years, and there's a range on this. This is anywhere from like 45 to 55. This can happen. Sometimes women have earlier menopause if they've had cancer treatment, they've been through chemotherapy. If you've had a hysterectomy, I know a lot of women that have had hysterectomies young because of endometriosis or other things, that even though they leave your ovaries, you can actually go into menopause earlier because of the changes that happen because of the surgery. But in perimenopause, so up to 10 years before you're going to go through menopause. So if I think my mom went through menopause around 55. So my expectation is that 45 is when I will hit maybe my perimenopause state. So at that time, your body starts to produce less progesterone. So progesterone comes from your eggs, from the follicle when you ovulate. Okay. And so your progesterone level decreases. Well, why does that matter? Progesterone does a lot of really great things for us, but to stay focused on our topic of weight gain and weight loss, progesterone does help to increase your metabolic rate. It helps to increase your metabolism, right? The amount of calories that your body is going to burn. So that's one thing. I'm going to do is talk about 5 different big things that are happening with your hormones that are shifting that cause this weight gain and weight loss resistance. Okay, so we talked about the perimenopause state. Then when you hit menopause, so when you stop ovulating, when you stop having cycles, what happens is that you actually lose estrogen. So in perimenopause, actually your estrogen is going to fluctuate up and down, but then when you hit menopause, that estrogen is going to drop. So, and what we have to realize is that estrogen has what they call anabolic effects, meaning estrogen helps us to build muscle. Why is that important? So our muscle, I mean, as you can probably guess, but our muscle helps us to burn calories, right? But our muscle also helps us to use up like the food we eat, use the energy better. I'm going to talk about this more at a later point, but it helps to improve our insulin, our blood sugar and insulin levels, which are a big driver of weight gain. So the other thing is that happens is that, so in menopause, that estrogen is going to drop. So we lose that anabolic effect, that muscle building effect. But estrogen also helps with insulin sensitivity. So I just touched on this. So just a little refresher. I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but when we eat food, when we eat protein, carbs, and fat, those things cause a release in insulin. And what insulin is the hormone. I always like to explain it as the energy from the food that you eat has to get from your bloodstream into your cell. And I'm looking at the door in this room here is why, sorry, I'm looking over to the side if you're watching the video. But insulin is like the key that unlocks the door to let that energy get from the bloodstream into the cell. The problem is that most of us, because of the food we eat, because of inflammation, because we're not less active, things like that, we probably have more energy, more blood sugar, more even protein can drive up blood sugar. We have more than we need, and because of that, our body has to make more insulin. And insulin can not work as it's like the key is kind of getting stuck, right? If we think about it as a key opening a door. So estrogen helps that key to work really well so that your body doesn't have to make more keys. Your body doesn't have to make more insulin. I hope that analogy makes sense. The other thing that happens in menopause is you become what we call androgen dominant. What does that mean? So androgens are hormones produced in the adrenal glands. And you can think of these are things like testosterone, but also another hormone called DHEA, and then their metabolites. And I know a lot of people end up getting testosterone. So if you do have low testosterone levels, testosterone does help with mood, it helps with metabolism, things like that. But the problem is actually if you have high testosterone and you've got low estrogen and progesterone, right? You're more testosterone dominant, you're more androgen dominant. In women, that actually promotes visceral fat, or that weight gain that happens in the belly, that happens around your organs and your intestines. So you might notice that, like if you look around, I've been in healthcare for years and I'm trained to look at people's bodies, right? If you notice a lot of women when they're postmenopause kind of lose that hourglass figure, right? And they gain a lot of weight around the belly. Okay. So, all right. So we talked about the perimenopause changes. We talked about the menopause changes. Then let's talk about muscle mass. So I touched on this before, but as we age, we lose muscle, which I think most of us kind of like know that happens. But the thing is that muscle, I mentioned this before, but muscle again increases our metabolism. So increases the amount of calories that we need to burn. So the more muscle we have, the more calories we need, the more, our body burns our fuel, right? And doesn't store it. But again, muscle also helps with insulin sensitivity. So it helps that key to work really well. What happens is that when we become insulin sensitive, it's like the keys aren't working and our pancreas starts making more and more keys. And the problem is that causes us to gain weight when we have a lot of insulin. So again, as we lose that muscle, then it's easier for us to gain weight because our metabolism decreases and then our insulin levels typically are going up. So, and part of this is because there's a hormone called growth hormone that declines as we age, actually beginning around age 30. So those of you that are listening to this, that you're in your 30s, even if you're in your early 20s, right? And we're not doing things to proactively maintain our muscle mass, one, our hormonal changes are going to make us lose that muscle mass. But then if we're not using our muscles, right? How many of us, I work from home, majority of the time I'm working, I'm sitting at a desk behind a computer. Um, and I know a lot of other people that are like that. So if we're not then in our time off, that we're not working, if we're not active, we're not building our muscle, we're going to lose it a lot more quickly. So the more sedentary we are, and then the worse like our diet is, and the worse stress we have, then the faster we're going to lose that muscle, lose the metabolism, lose those positive insulin properties. The other thing I see when it comes to hormonal changes, so we again, just to recap, we talked about the perimenopause changes, menopause, decreased muscle mass. The other thing that I see in so many women, I'll tell you, so many women, even in my 20-year-old, 20, range clients, is problems with cortisol. So I think we probably have all heard, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm assuming that you're interested in your health, right? You've done a little research. Maybe actually did like a little Instagram post about this not too long ago. Do you think you have high cortisol? Like most of us have heard of that and know, okay, stress causes cortisol to go up. But I don't think a lot of people realize that, yes, so stress triggers this hormonal cascade in our body, and our adrenal glands produce cortisol. And this is a protective thing. This is actually like our body's way of protecting itself. So when that cortisol goes up, it's typically in a time of stress. You can think of, fight or flight is a lot of times what people say. So when we're in fight or flight, our body, that primitive response is to do all these things that help us to respond in that moment. Well, the problem is like our ancestors were like fleeing from predators and things like that, where we get an alert on our phone about, I don't know, just different things. You work deadlines, finances, relationship stress, job stress, money stress, all of those things are putting us into fight or flight constantly. So cortisol is driven up, which drives up blood sugar, which again drives up insulin. So you can see like all of the problems, like go back to this blood sugar and insulin, blood sugar and insulin. But the other thing to remember, so not only is it psychological stress, but we can also have lifestyle stress. I think of I'm a nurse by trade, all my night shift nurses and other healthcare workers that work night shift. My husband is an engineer and he's working night shift right now, right? Not sleeping a normal schedule, not, we have small children, they wake up in the middle of the night. Like those lifestyle factors of, not getting good rest, eating a poor diet, dehydration, lack of exercise, all those things are also stressors on the body. But then things like inflammation and infection. So what I do with a lot of my clients that I'm working with is we're using functional lab testing. Actually went through a pretty significant test with a client yesterday. And she had a ton of inflammation in her gut and infection in her gut, right? That is actually stressing her body. So we have this cortisol release, blood sugar is high, and then insulin is also high. But the problem is most of us, right, don't get really like we have, especially the ladies I talk to a lot, you're in your 35 to 55, I would say as kind of average range in there. You have kids, you're working, right? That's just your life, is that you have all this demand, you have all this stress going on. And so kind of constantly from that have higher than optimal blood sugar levels and higher than optimal insulin levels. And that insulin, we have to understand, is a fat storing hormone. So how insulin works is it's going to help get the energy into the cell, but if we have more energy than we need, our body's, again, primitive response, our body's protective mechanism is to store that extra energy as fat so that our body can use it later in times of famine. But most of us are not in famine, We live in if we live in a Western culture, we are not starving every day. We probably have more to eat than we need. So then the final piece, as you've seen, all of this goes back to insulin, blood sugar and insulin, is that insulin resistance. So those changes that happen, the changes with your progesterone and estrogen, the changes with testosterone, the loss of growth hormone, loss of muscle mass, the stress driving up blood sugar and insulin. So these are all the hormonal changes that happen in perimenopause and menopause contribute to this. But the thing is, if you already had insulin resistance before perimenopause, before menopause, if you have insulin resistance in your 20s and 30s, insulin resistance is actually going to be worse when you go through perimenopause or menopause. So I know I'm like a bearer of bad news today here, but the good thing is we can turn these things around. And that's why it's so important to start living a healthy lifestyle and making those changes, learning about these things and making these changes. Like for you ladies that might be listening that are in your 20s or 30s, if you can learn this stuff now and make these changes now, that's going to make those hormonal changes you're naturally going to have later in life so much easier. So, okay, so basically what we've narrowed it down to is that blood sugar and insulin are the big problem here. And obviously there's some things we can't change, but there's a lot of things that we can. So how do we lower blood sugar? How do we lower insulin? I'm going to give you and I've gone into all these things on other podcasts, so I encourage you to listen to other episodes that I've done. But just for time's sake, I'm going to hit these high level points. But so if we've got high blood sugar, we've got high insulin, the first thing we've got to focus on is our diet, of course, right? So we do have to lower. So if our blood sugar is already running high and our insulin is running high, we've got to lower our blood sugar, which means we've got to eat less carbs. So this is why, yes, the keto diets are so popular. There is a way to do keto that's better for women, especially women with hormonal issues, than it is for men. I just always think of like people eating a ton of inflammatory things, a ton of cheese, a ton of, just we want to do, and there's a lot of books out there. We want to do low carb for women in a very healthy way. We want to be getting our fats from healthy, high omega-3 fat sources. We want to be avoiding those inflammatory things that can make our hormones worse and make insulin resistance worse. And we want to be like making sure we're getting lots of fruits and veggies in, maybe not so much fruit, low sugar fruits, high fiber fruits. But that's what I see a lot of times is that when people are going keto, they're going low carb, they're just eating a lot of junk type food. So we want to do a, very heart healthy, low carb diet. Maybe that's a whole nother podcast we can do sometime. So the other thing we've got to do, and I should say, I do recommend working with somebody on this because it's really hard. If you don't have experience in nutrition, if you don't have training in nutrition, it's really hard to know what's going on. And it's so beneficial for you instead of trying to DIY it, just to have somebody else who knows how to take somebody on a low carb diet to look at what you're doing and help you make the changes that you need, that you just don't know what you don't know, right? All right, so the other thing, okay, we talked about that muscle mass loss and how important muscle mass is. So the other thing I see so many women doing, trying to lose weight, is doing so much cardio. And guess what? Cardio is driving up inflammation. Cardio is driving up stress, blood sugar, insulin. We're just like making the problem worse. So what I recommend for every woman I ever talk to, whether it's in my health coaching practice or DPC practice or on the internet, things like that, I generally recommend that women are doing at least 50% of their workouts are resistance training, right? So you probably need to be doing less cardio than you are, and you need to be lifting more weights than you are. So many women are not lifting weights. I see that in patients all the time. They're like, I'm walking. I'm like, okay, I don't want to discourage anybody from any movement, but if we really want to see results, we've got to like get this can be done with body weight exercises where you're not even using any equipment. This can be done with things like resistance bands. This, of course, can be done with free weights and dumbbells. Or if you really get into it and you want to, I love to really do more what we would call powerlifting, or I love Olympic lifting too. That's another topic for another day. I have a background in CrossFit. And actually we Olympic lifted in college. I was a athlete. I played volleyball in college, and we kind of got into that some during my college years. Um, but again, doing some resistance training. Again, this is something I recommend. There's lots of plans you can find online. Yes, you can start off DIYing, but you're gonna want somebody to look at what you're doing, make sure you're doing movements correctly, and make sure you're pushing yourself. I think a lot of women don't push themselves to the extent that they can. They're kind of like afraid. And I think sometimes if you've never, I remember a friend of mine saying this, if you don't have a background in athletics or you haven't weight trained before, it can be kind of hard to know, like, is this a good pain or a bad pain? Am I sore or am I hurting myself? So that's where working with somebody who knows, what they're doing can be so key. If you guys missed it, the episode I did earlier this week, Tuesday, with Caitlin Martin, she's a great resource if you're here local in Florida. She actually does virtual training as well. So just a plug for Caitlin. The other things that you could do, again, I'm going to hit these quickly, are again, so that cortisol, that stress response is a lot of times in women driving up blood sugar and insulin as well. So regulating that stress response in your body. And there's a lot of ways you can do this. I recommend always that people do some kind of nervous system regulation practice every day. This can be prayer, this can be meditation, this can be deep breathing. Deep breathing is honestly my favorite way, and I think the most evidence-based, research-back way to down-regulate your nervous system. But you've got to do something every day to get your body out of flight or fight and get into what we call that rest and digest. There's also some other things that you can do. There's supplements, things, I think most people have heard of ashwagandha. I always joke with clients. I'm like, you can find ashwagandha gummies at Target, like adaptogens, things like that. There are, supplements too that you can take to help decrease your stress and regulate your nervous system. And the last and final thing I want to bring up is you can do hormone replacement therapy. What I want to say about that is this is like a multimodality approach. So just going on HRT is probably not going to make you lose weight, right? Because it's not going to reverse the insulin resistance that's probably already happening. So yes, you can go on HRT, you can be taking bioidenticals, things like that, but you're still going to need to do the other things that we talk about, that I talked about. You're still going to need to do the work to reverse that insulin resistance through the diet, through the exercise, through the lifestyle changes. So, all right. That was so much to put in a podcast episode. I apologize if I totally fire hosed you with information today. But I just really wanted to talk about this topic because so many women I talk to are just in this boat and so frustrated about the hormonal changes and the weight gain that they're having. So if you learned something new today, if this was valuable, if you have a friend that needs to hear this, I would just ask that you would pass this podcast episode on to them. I'd love it if you shot me a DM and told me what you thought about it. I'm probably most active on Instagram. You can find me at Lori Aikman. And if you're interested in working with me, so if you are in Florida or not in Florida, we do have options for you. What I'll do is put a link for our interest call in the show notes. It's just a quick 15-minute call to hear about you, hear about the pain points you're having, the help you're looking for, and to see if, our solutions are right for you. So yeah, that's it for today. I hope you guys loved this episode. Talk to you soon.